The Middle Ages have always fascinated historians and curious minds alike. Beneath the tales of knights, kings, and sprawling castles lies a world of the bizarre, the shocking, and the utterly unbelievable. From strange weather phenomena to inexplicable medical treatments, and from political scandals to eerie events that seem to belong more to folklore than history, the medieval period was full of moments that defy logic even today. Imagine walking through the cobbled streets of a 14th-century European town. The air is thick with the smell of smoke, baked bread, and livestock. People are bustling around in tunics and dresses, trying to go about their daily lives. But then, something happens, a phenomenon so strange it would have everyone whispering for generations. This isn't a story from a fantasy novel. It's real. One of the most bewildering events recorded occurred in 1374 in the city of Aachen, Germany. Reports speak of a sudden rainstorm that didn't bring water, but stones. Literally, stones fell from the sky, leaving townsfolk injured and livestock dead. Scholars have debated the cause for centuries. Some claim it was a meteorological anomaly, others whispered about divine punishment for sins. Imagine trying to explain to a king that his streets were littered not with rain, but with pebbles and rocks. But the stone rain was just the beginning. Across the English Channel, in 1453, villagers in the small town of Eam experienced a plague unlike any other. What made it strange wasn't just the disease, it was how the villagers reacted. Foreseeing the spread of death, they isolated themselves, willingly cutting off contact with neighboring towns. Hundreds would die, but their self-sacrifice saved thousands more. The story, retold countless times, reads almost like legend, but records confirm its truth. The courage of Eam remains one of history's most haunting examples of collective human action in the face of death. Meanwhile, in Italy, in 1485, a peculiar event gripped the city of Florence. A man claimed he could levitate. Crowds gathered daily to witness him rise several feet off the ground, supported by no visible means. Skeptics tried to uncover trickery, but many witnesses swore by their eyes. Modern scholars suggest illusions or clever mechanical devices, but the records make it clear, for weeks, Florence was captivated by a man who defied gravity. And then there's the infamous story of the dancing plague of 1518 in Strasbourg. Hundreds of people danced uncontrollably through the streets for days. Some collapsed, exhausted, others even died from strokes or heart attacks. No one understood why it happened. Modern scientists theorize mass hysteria or a reaction to contaminated bread, but no explanation fully satisfies the eerie horror that the townspeople endured. Imagine waking up one day, compelled by an invisible force to dance endlessly, with no control over your own body. The medieval world wasn't just strange for its diseases or natural phenomena, it was also a place of bizarre politics and even stranger punishments. In 1376, in France, a nobleman was put on trial for supposedly poisoning the king's wine with a concoction that would make him speak only truth. While the king survived unharmed, the nobleman was executed in one of the most convoluted legal proceedings recorded. The trial documents read like a courtroom drama combined with a fairy tale, complete with testimonies from witnesses who swore the poison made the king hallucinate and reveal state secrets in the most unusual ways. Medical practices of the time were equally shocking. Leech therapy, bloodletting, and even the use of powdered mummies as medicine were commonplace. In England, one physician in 1420 prescribed a treatment that involved wearing a hat made entirely of pigeon feathers to draw out evil spirits causing headaches. The absurdity seems laughable today, but at the time, desperate patients clung to any hope, no matter how strange. Some of the most bizarre medieval records involve animals. In 1290, a pig was tried in France for allegedly murdering a child. Court records describe witnesses, lawyers, and even a jury deliberating over the pig's fate. Eventually, the pig was executed publicly, sending a message to townsfolk that justice would be served, even if the accused was not human. Meanwhile, in Norway, a polar bear was recorded wandering into a fishing village, causing panic and fascination alike, becoming a local legend for decades. Even the weather played its part in medieval strangeness. Accounts from the 14th century describe snow falling in the middle of summer, rivers freezing overnight, and birds raining from the sky in numbers that baffled both peasants and scholars. People interpreted these as signs from the heavens, omens of war, famine, or divine wrath. Today, they might be anomalies, climate events, or even exaggerations, but to a medieval observer, they were terrifyingly real. Yet, despite the chaos and bizarre happenings, humanity endured. Medieval people laughed, loved, built, fought, and prayed, just like we do today. And it's in these strange events, the stone rains, the dancing plagues, the floating men, and the murderous pigs, that we find the true spirit of a time so distant, yet so connected to our own fascination with the unbelievable. This is only a glimpse. History is packed with events so strange they make fiction look tame. Every town, castle, and village had its own tales of the absurd, the miraculous, and the downright frightening. The Middle Ages weren't merely a period of darkness, they were a stage for humanity's strangest and most unforgettable stories. Mysteries of the medieval mind and nature. As the Middle Ages progressed, strange events didn't slow down, they multiplied, leaving behind a tapestry of stories so bizarre that modern readers can barely believe they happened. Beyond the stone rains, dancing plagues, and levitating men, there were tales that reveal the medieval mind itself, the fears, the superstitions, and the strange ways people interpreted the world around them. One of the most curious tales comes from 12th century England. A group of villagers claimed that the River Thames had turned to blood overnight. When scholars arrived to investigate, they found that a rare bloom of algae had given the water a reddish hue. To the villagers, however, it was a terrifying omen, signaling the wrath of God. Priests preached fiery sermons, urging people to repent for imagined sins, while children hid under the thatched roofs, fearing the end of the world. In an era where science was still in its infancy, events like these blurred the line between natural phenomena and divine punishment. Meanwhile, in 1325, in northern Italy, a noblewoman named Beatrice di Tenda became the center of one of the strangest judicial processes in medieval history. Accused of poisoning her husband and supposedly plotting against the state, her trial included bizarre rituals to prove her guilt or innocence. She was made to touch sacred relics, confess in the presence of holy men, and even participate in public fasting trials that lasted days. While her death was tragic, her story offers a window into how medieval society intertwined superstition, justice, and fear. Strange medical practices continued to baffle. In France during the 13th century, a doctor recommended that patients suffering from melancholy should sleep with the corpses of saints to absorb holy energy. Elsewhere, leeches weren't just applied to blood, sometimes they were attached to the eyes or ears, or even swallowed, to cure ailments. The medieval mind sought patterns, and sometimes, the solutions were as strange as the problems themselves. Natural disasters also took on an almost mythical status. In 1361, Europe was struck by a storm that lasted several days, reportedly uprooting forests and flattening entire villages. Chroniclers wrote of trees moving like ships on the waves, and birds falling from the sky in terror. To modern eyes, it might have been a hurricane or tornado, but to a medieval observer, it was an event of divine significance. Kings consulted astrologers, peasants prayed day and night, and the tales spread across kingdoms, growing with each retelling. One of the most haunting and strange phenomena of the period was the so-called corpse candle sightings. In England, during the 14th century, villagers reported mysterious flames floating above graves at night. Some claimed the lights marked impending deaths, while others insisted they were restless spirits. Even centuries later, folklore preserved these eerie lights, and historians believe they may have been early sightings of natural gas emissions or swamp fires, but to those living in the medieval era, these lights were terrifying omens, often sparking panic and superstition. Then there were the medieval miracle animals. In 1478, a cat in Paris was tried for witchcraft. The animal was accused of being in league with a sorcerer who caused crops to fail. The trial proceedings included testimonies from neighbors, examinations by priests, and even interrogation techniques adapted for animals. In another instance, a rooster in England was believed to have predicted the outcome of battles by crowing at specific hours, a claim so widely believed that generals reportedly consulted local poultry before engaging in combat. But not all strange events were local. The medieval world was connected in ways we often underestimate. Letters and manuscripts describe travelers encountering monstrous creatures in distant lands, giants in the forests of Norway, headless men in the Scottish Highlands, and ships filled with strange beasts off the coast of Spain. While modern science attributes many of these tales to exaggeration, fear, and imagination, for medieval Europeans, these stories shaped their understanding of the world, fueling both curiosity and terror. Religious experiences, too, were often strange and mystifying. In 1250, a nun named Juliana of Liege claimed to receive visions of angels instructing her to institute special celebrations for the Eucharist. Her visions were described with such detail that entire towns followed her guidance, creating rituals still remembered centuries later. Meanwhile, in Germany, monks documented strange noises echoing from the forest at night. Some claimed they were angels or demons, others believed they were warnings of approaching wars or famine. Even ordinary objects became the center of bizarre medieval tales. Mirrors, for instance, were sometimes believed to trap souls. A wealthy merchant in Venice was said to have broken a mirror that showed the devil's reflection, only to suffer a series of misfortunes shortly after. Jewelers, blacksmiths, and artisans often incorporated charms into their work, hoping to protect clients from curses or evil spirits, a practice that mixed commerce, superstition, and daily life into a unique cultural phenomenon. In every corner of medieval Europe, the line between reality and the extraordinary was thin. Strange storms, eerie lights, talking animals, miraculous healings, and bizarre legal cases were all part of life. To survive, people needed courage, faith, and imagination. And while the Middle Ages might appear dark or primitive to modern eyes, they were filled with a richness of experience and an endless parade of stories that challenge our understanding of human history. Royal scandals, eerie festivals, and the unbelievable everyday. By the late 14th and early 15th centuries, the medieval world had become a stage for human drama unlike anything we might imagine today. Kings, queens, and nobles were embroiled in scandals that could shock entire kingdoms, while ordinary villagers encountered strange events that blurred the line between myth and reality. One of the most notorious royal scandals occurred in 1399, when King Richard II of England faced accusations of tyranny and betrayal. But behind the political intrigue were bizarre stories of his personal life. Chroniclers wrote of mysterious disappearances within the palace, secret messages hidden in tapestries, and rumors of sorcery used to manipulate the king's mind. One report claimed that an advisor had been replaced by a doppelganger, a sinister double who whispered secret plots in the king's ear. Whether true or exaggerated, these stories reveal how medieval society interpreted power, fear, and deception in ways that seem like fantasy to modern readers. Meanwhile, across Europe, strange festivals captivated local populations. In Bruges, Belgium, during the mid-1400s, villagers celebrated the Feast of Fools, in which normal social rules were inverted. Priests and nobles were mocked, peasants could act as rulers, and absurd competitions, from shouting contests to bizarre races with blindfolded participants, filled the streets. Historians note that while it was meant as comic relief, the festival often spiraled into chaos, sometimes resulting in injuries or even deaths. The medieval mind embraced the absurd as a way to cope with the hardships of life, turning every celebration into a spectacle of the strange. In the Scandinavian lands, the 15th century brought mysterious weather phenomena that terrified populations. In 1428, villagers in Norway reported a blood-red aurora lighting up the night sky. Chroniclers described it as a fiery curtain descending from heaven, warning of plague or war. Modern science might explain it as an aurora borealis event amplified by volcanic dust or solar activity, but to those medieval villagers, the sight was terrifyingly supernatural. Mothers would hide children, farmers abandoned fields, and local priests conducted special masses to ward off disaster. The medieval period was also notorious for bizarre wars and military strategies. In 1380, a skirmish in Italy involved soldiers using flaming pigs as weapons. The pigs, set on fire, were sent charging toward enemy lines, causing panic and disruption. While gruesome and cruel, such tactics show the ingenuity, and sometimes sheer madness, of medieval warfare. In another instance, Scottish clans reportedly used bagpipes in psychological warfare, playing music so loud it disoriented enemy troops before battle. These strange and inventive strategies reveal a world where imagination and survival were intertwined in violent and often shocking ways. Religion, of course, remained at the heart of medieval strangeness. Pilgrimages were not merely journeys of faith, they were often experiences of wonder and terror. In 1356, pilgrims traveling to Santiago de Compostela in Spain reported encountering a man of stone, who walked along the path and disappeared when approached. Others claimed to see visions of angels or demons testing their faith. These experiences were meticulously recorded in manuscripts, blending the miraculous with the terrifying. Even today, such accounts make readers question how much of medieval Europe was governed by the natural world versus the unseen forces believed to shape it. Then there were tales of bizarre punishments and trials that would astound a modern audience. In 1431, Joan of Arc faced one of the most famous trials in history, but the records also reveal the sheer oddity of legal proceedings at the time. Questions about visions, voices, and her divine guidance dominated the court, while political manipulation determined her fate. Lesser-known trials involved animals, inanimate objects, or even statues accused of crimes. These proceedings show a legal system deeply entwined with superstition, fear, and the unexplainable. Medical practices continue to baffle even the most learned scholars. In Venice, a doctor recommended that patients suffering from bad air hang garlands of herbs over their beds while chanting prayers. Elsewhere, in Germany, a healer prescribed placing live frogs on the afflicted area to draw out evil spirits. While these remedies seem absurd today, they represent a desperate attempt to understand a world full of death, disease, and mystery. And yet, for all the darkness, the medieval world was also a place of wonder and ingenuity. Cathedrals rose from the ground in impossible feats of architecture. Inventors crafted mechanical devices that amazed audiences. Artists painted vivid depictions of mythical creatures and divine visions. In the midst of disease, famine, and war, people created beauty, celebrated life, and recorded their stories, many of which were strange enough to leave us stunned today. From royal intrigue and supernatural sightings to festivals that defied logic and war tactics that seemed insane, the Middle Ages were a world of extremes. Every corner of Europe, from bustling cities to remote villages, held stories so unbelievable that modern readers might assume they were exaggerated. And yet, meticulous records prove that these events, no matter how bizarre, really happened. Natural wonders, strange beasts, and social oddities. The Middle Ages were not only a time of human drama but also a period when nature itself seemed to play tricks on humanity. Across Europe, the natural world often behaved in ways that were inexplicable to medieval observers, creating events that were terrifying, fascinating, and downright unbelievable. In 1347, chroniclers in France recorded a strange phenomenon: rivers running with a thick, red foam. Locals believed it was a sign of the end times, while modern scientists suggest it may have been caused by algae blooms or chemical reactions from decaying organic matter. Still, for those living at the time, seeing a river bleed red was a terrifying omen that prompted days of fasting, prayers, and communal penance. Strange animals were another hallmark of the era. In 1420, fishermen off the coast of England reported seeing a sea creature with a human-like face and glowing eyes. Descriptions varied wildly. Some claimed it had scales, others said it had fur, but everyone agreed it was terrifying. These sightings fueled legends of mermaids, sea monsters, and other mythical creatures. Tales of enormous wolves, headless men, and giant birds also populated local folklore, creating a sense that the world was far more mysterious and dangerous than modern maps could depict. Even ordinary domestic life had its share of oddities. In villages across Germany and France, festivals often included mock trials, where peasants could put local animals, like pigs or goats, on trial for crimes. These events were not just entertainment, they reflected the medieval belief that morality extended beyond humans. Legal records from the time describe animals being fined, imprisoned, or even executed for misdeeds, demonstrating a worldview both bizarre and fascinating to modern readers. Natural disasters could also be shockingly strange. In 1361, a hailstorm in Central Europe reportedly produced stones the size of chicken eggs, destroying crops, smashing roofs, and terrifying entire communities. Elsewhere, snow fell in the middle of summer, rivers froze overnight, and sudden storms would appear without warning. People interpreted these events as divine punishment, messages from saints, or portents of war, blending fear with superstition in ways that shaped society. Even food and agriculture held peculiar mysteries. In 1380, a strange phenomenon known as the green wheat occurred in parts of Italy. Crops sprouted with unusually bright green stalks, and some claimed they emitted a sweet fragrance. Farmers were divided. Some saw it as a blessing from the heavens, while others feared it was cursed. Historical accounts describe villagers offering prayers, rituals, and even sacrifices to ensure the wheat would grow properly. Social customs of the era were equally fascinating. In 1450, a festival in northern France required villagers to wear elaborate masks and act as each other's social superiors for a day. Nobles were mocked, and peasants enjoyed temporary freedoms that would be impossible under normal circumstances. Scholars suggest these festivals allowed people to release social tension, but the chaotic celebrations often led to public fights, injuries, or bizarre spectacles that would be shocking to anyone from today's world. Religion continued to intersect with the strange in fascinating ways. Pilgrims reported seeing miraculous images that moved, statues that wept, and relics that seemed to emit light. In some monasteries, monks claimed that holy books would mysteriously open to specific pages to offer divine guidance. The medieval imagination turned faith into a daily encounter with the miraculous and the uncanny, leaving a trail of accounts that would astound any modern reader. Even crime and punishment could be stranger than fiction. In 1395, a thief in Italy was punished by being placed in a barrel filled with spikes and rolled down a hill. In another village, witches were accused of controlling the weather, causing hail, or blighting crops. Trials included torture, confessions extracted under extreme duress, and bizarre rituals intended to reveal hidden truths. The legal system was inseparable from superstition, creating a society where fear and imagination shaped reality. Through it all, the people of the Middle Ages adapted, survived, and even thrived amidst the strangeness. They navigated a world filled with unpredictable storms, mysterious creatures, strange social customs, and supernatural beliefs. And while many of these events seem absurd or terrifying today, they were part of the fabric of life for medieval communities. The Middle Ages were not simply a time of darkness, they were a period of wonder, terror, and the extraordinary. Every town, forest, and river had its own stories, many of which challenge our modern understanding of history. These strange events remind us that reality is often stranger than fiction, and that human history is richer and more bizarre than most people ever imagine. Bizarre battles, unusual medicine, and strange towns. The medieval period was a world where the ordinary and the extraordinary coexisted in ways that seem impossible today. Not only did nature surprise people, but human ingenuity, and sometimes sheer madness, created events that remain shocking even centuries later. Bizarre battles. Wars in the Middle Ages were not just fought with swords and arrows, they were often staged with peculiar tactics that modern historians can hardly believe. In 1428, during a conflict in Italy, soldiers used an unexpected weapon, flaming oxen. Oxen were set on fire and driven toward enemy lines, causing chaos and panic. While horrifying, the tactic was effective, and it shows the lengths commanders would go to achieve victory. In another instance, Scottish clans used psychological warfare in an astonishing way. Before a critical battle, pipers would play music continuously for hours, their sounds amplified across valleys, disorienting opposing troops. Soldiers reported hallucinations, confusion, and even fainting, giving the clans a decisive advantage. Battles in the Middle Ages were as much about strategy and fear as they were about brute force. Even the siege of castles produced strange events. During the siege of Chillon Castle in 1476, defenders reportedly used fake corpses on the walls to trick attackers into thinking the castle was already defended by a supernatural army. The ruse worked, and attackers fled in terror. Medieval warfare, it seems, thrived on deception, superstition, and theatricality. #unusual medicine. Medical practices in the Middle Ages were a strange combination of observation, superstition, and imagination. Doctors treated almost everything with bizarre remedies. In 1385, a German physician recommended that a patient suffering from fever should wear a live frog tied to their head for 7 nights. The belief was that the frog would absorb the illness. Bloodletting was another common, though dangerous, treatment. Patients were bled until they became weak, under the belief that it removed bad humors from the body. Some physicians even applied leeches to unusual areas like the eyes or the ears. Herbal remedies were popular, but they often included dangerous substances, such as mercury or arsenic, believed to cure everything from plague to melancholy. Other remedies seem almost comical today. A French doctor in 1410 recommended that patients chew on powdered mummy to cure headaches. Meanwhile, in Italy, people believed that sleeping with a cat under their bed would absorb evil spirits and ensure restful sleep. While some remedies were harmless, others were fatal. Highlighting the trial and error nature of medieval medicine. Strange towns and villages. Medieval towns themselves were full of oddities. Streets were narrow, often filled with refuse, but they were also centers of remarkable events. In 1365, in a small French village, an entire festival celebrated a miracle pig that was said to produce gold coins. Villagers would bring offerings, believing the pig's magic could protect them from famine or disease. Other towns had stranger legends. In Norway, fishermen reported seeing a shadow man near the docks at night, who would vanish as soon as anyone approached. In England, certain villages claimed that their wells could cure illnesses if touched by the hand of a local priest during a full moon. These beliefs, though strange, were an integral part of medieval life and culture, blending superstition with daily survival. Even marketplaces were not immune to odd happenings. Vendors sold not only food and cloth but also charms, relics, and magical potions. Some merchants claimed to sell feathers from flying dragons, while others offered water from enchanted springs. These items were believed to protect against disease, evil spirits, or even bad luck, a reflection of a world where the supernatural and the mundane existed side by side. Religious and mystical oddities. Faith shaped almost every aspect of medieval life, and miraculous occurrences were part of daily existence. Pilgrims visiting holy sites often reported visions or hearing voices. In 1402, a nun in Germany claimed that a statue of the Virgin Mary wept real tears. Crowds gathered, and the event was recorded in local manuscripts, sparking debates among theologians about divine intervention versus natural phenomena. In Spain, certain monasteries reported that holy relics would move on their own, sometimes pointing to hidden treasures or warning of approaching danger. These accounts, while extraordinary, were taken seriously. Influencing decisions from local politics to personal behavior. Medieval Europe was a world where the line between the ordinary and the extraordinary was blurred. Bizarre battles, deadly yet inventive medical practices, mystical towns, and supernatural beliefs all coexisted in a society trying to survive amidst disease, famine, and uncertainty. For the people of the time, these strange events were reality. Today, they read like fantastical stories, almost too unbelievable to be true. Peculiar customs, odd behaviors, and mysterious natural events. The medieval world was a place of contrasts. While life was harsh, people found ways to cope through festivals, rituals, and customs that seem utterly bizarre today. The extraordinary often intertwined with the everyday, creating stories that would shock even the most imaginative modern reader. Peculiar social customs. In many towns, social hierarchy was taken so seriously that it led to strange and strict customs. For example, in 1387, a French village instituted the Day of Reversal, where peasants would dress as nobles, and nobles were forced to serve the commoners for a day. This temporary inversion of roles often devolved into chaotic revelry, sometimes ending in fights or property damage. Marriage customs could also be astonishingly odd. In some parts of England, Widows were required to participate in wake trials of their deceased husbands to ensure that no foul play occurred. Villagers would question them, inspect the body, and sometimes even demand confessions under bizarre legal pretenses. In northern Italy, festivals sometimes involved mock battles, where participants reenacted legendary fights, complete with strange weapons and rules. These weren't just entertainment, they were communal expressions of history, pride, and superstition, blending danger and drama in ways that seem theatrical even today. Odd personal behaviors. Individual behaviors in the Middle Ages were often influenced by superstition and fear. Some nobles believed that wearing a specific color of silk could protect them from poison, while others carried tiny charms to ward off curses. In 1425, a German aristocrat reportedly refused to eat anything not blessed by a priest, claiming that only divine approval could protect him from invisible spirits. People often adopted peculiar diets or habits based on local beliefs. In parts of France, it was common to sleep with a loaf of bread under one's pillow to prevent nightmares. Elsewhere, villagers chewed on dried herbs or carried small stones believed to absorb sickness or evil spirits. These practices might seem strange, but they were deeply embedded in daily life, blending folklore with practical survival strategies. Mysterious natural events. Nature in the Middle Ages was unpredictable, and people often interpreted unusual events as supernatural signs. In 1350, a storm in Germany reportedly produced a rainbow at midnight, visible for several hours. People interpreted it as a divine warning, sparking prayers, processions, and even fasting. In 1372, reports from northern England described a river of fire seen at night. Witnesses claimed the water itself glowed, reflecting eerie lights that moved like spirits. Modern scientists speculate that such phenomena could have been caused by phosphorescent algae or gases, but to medieval eyes, it was terrifyingly mystical. Volcanic eruptions and earthquakes were often imbued with symbolic meaning. In Italy, in 1452, villagers reported hearing voices from the earth after a small quake, which they believed predicted famine or disease. Chronicles from the time record panic, prayers, and emergency rituals intended to appease divine forces or spirits believed to inhabit the land. Mystical animals and omens. Animals often played a strange role in medieval life. Cats, for example, were alternately revered and feared. In some towns, black cats were believed to carry curses, while in others, they were protectors against evil spirits. In 1405, a raven reportedly appeared at a French battlefield, and its presence was interpreted as an omen of victory or death depending on the chronicler. Even domestic animals were involved in unusual trials. Pigs, goats, and cows were sometimes tried for crimes like theft or causing harm, reflecting the medieval belief that moral responsibility could extend beyond humans. These events, strange as they may seem, were serious and often documented meticulously in local legal records. Life in the Middle Ages was a complex tapestry of the ordinary and the extraordinary. People navigated a world filled with superstition, mysterious natural events, and social rituals that seem bizarre today. From peculiar festivals to mystical omens, every day held the potential for wonder, fear, and amazement. Medieval Europe was a place where reality often mirrored fantasy, and where the impossible sometimes became commonplace. The events we've explored so far, bizarre battles, strange medicine, unusual towns, odd customs, and mystical phenomena, are just a glimpse into a world that is stranger than fiction. Royal secrets, strange oaths, and bizarre daily life. The medieval world was as much about spectacle and ritual as it was about survival. From kings and queens to peasants, everyone participated in customs and practices that would seem baffling to us today. Royal secrets and intrigues. Royal courts were hotbeds of intrigue, scandal, and sometimes downright bizarre behavior. In 1388, in France, King Charles VI reportedly suffered from sudden episodes of madness. Chroniclers describe him believing he was made of glass, refusing to be touched or even sit on solid furniture. Courtiers had to devise elaborate strategies to protect him, including padded thrones and mirrors to reassure him of his safety. The king's condition affected the governance of the entire nation, and it remains one of the most peculiar episodes in royal history. Across Europe, mysterious disappearances were common. Princesses and heirs sometimes vanished for months, only to reappear with strange stories of captivity, visions, or secret alliances. In 1440, a noblewoman in Italy claimed that she had been kidnapped by invisible spirits and taken to a distant castle. Her account, recorded in official letters, sparked panic and fascination among the nobility. Strange oaths and rituals. Medieval society placed immense importance on oaths and rituals, many of which were unusual by modern standards. Knights swore elaborate oaths of loyalty, often in the presence of sacred relics or unusual symbols. In 1412, a group of English knights pledged allegiance by drinking from a cup supposedly blessed by angels, an act meant to bind them spiritually and politically. In some towns, public ceremonies involved bizarre rites. Villagers would swear to obey local laws while holding relics, touching sacred stones, or even standing barefoot in freezing rivers. Breaking such oaths was believed to bring divine punishment, sometimes more feared than earthly consequences. These rituals show how deeply superstition and faith shaped everyday life. Bizarre daily life. Daily life in the Middle Ages could be strange and uncomfortable by today's standards. Hygiene was minimal, public baths were rare, and people often relied on herbal concoctions to clean themselves. Despite this, people developed unusual practices to stay healthy. In parts of Germany, families would hang bunches of herbs over their beds to purify the air and ward off disease. Food habits were also unique. In Italy, some believed that eating certain colored foods on specific days would influence luck or health. In England, it was common to mix herbs, spices, and even crushed minerals into bread and soups, both for flavor and magical protection. Festivals and markets often featured odd delicacies, such as roasted dormice in Italy or spiced offal pies in France, foods that would surprise modern palates. Clothing could be equally strange. Sumptuary laws dictated what people could wear based on social status, but some nobles flaunted bizarre fashions, enormous hats, shoes with pointed toes several feet long, or dresses with elaborate, cumbersome sleeves. These styles were often impractical but reflected social hierarchy, pride, and sometimes superstition. Unexplained phenomena in towns. Even everyday town life included mysterious events. Bells would ring without explanation, fountains would freeze in summer, or strange lights would appear over certain houses. In 1397, a merchant in Venice claimed that his store was visited nightly by a ghostly figure rearranging his goods. While some dismissed these accounts, others documented them meticulously, blending observation with folklore. Animals also played a curious role in daily life. In 1425, a herd of cows in northern France reportedly refused to leave a particular field, which villagers believed was haunted. In other places, cats were treated as both protectors and omens, while birds were watched carefully for signs of impending disaster. Medieval life was a mixture of the practical and the surreal. From royal eccentricities and strange oaths to bizarre clothing, food, and unexplained events, every day could present something extraordinary. These stories reveal that people in the Middle Ages navigated a world full of wonder, fear, and imagination, leaving behind accounts that continue to amaze us today. Festivals of wonder, natural horrors, and human imagination. As we reach the final part of our journey into the strange and shocking events of the Middle Ages, we encounter a world where celebration, fear, and imagination intertwined in ways that modern audiences can barely comprehend. Bizarre festivals and public spectacles. Medieval people had a fascination with spectacle, often blending humor, fear, and ritual. One striking example is the Feast of the Ass, celebrated in parts of France and Spain. During this festival, participants reenacted biblical stories involving animals, with actors sometimes riding donkeys through town while delivering sermons in verse. The festival blurred the line between sacred and absurd, creating chaos and joy simultaneously. In Germany, the Dancing Guilds festival saw entire towns compelled to dance in the streets for hours. While some danced willingly, others were said to be enchanted or compelled by mysterious forces. Scholars speculate that mass hysteria, overconsumption of alcohol, or ergot-contaminated bread may have caused these episodes, but the event became legendary for its strangeness and danger. Elsewhere, mock trials and unusual pageants were common. Villagers would try animals, statues, or even inanimate objects for crimes, creating absurd yet socially significant rituals. These festivals weren't merely entertainment, they reflected social norms, collective anxieties, and a fascination with the unpredictable. Natural horrors and mysteries. Nature in the Middle Ages was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Storms could arrive without warning, strange weather phenomena shocked communities, and unexplained events like blood rains or glowing rivers were taken as divine messages. In 1362, the North Sea flood, known as the Grootmandrank, Great Drowning of Men, devastated parts of the Netherlands and Germany, killing tens of thousands. Entire villages were swept away, and chroniclers reported seeing buildings floating in the sea and miraculous survival tales. To medieval observers, such disasters were often interpreted as punishment from the heavens, blending tragedy with the supernatural. Other events, like the red auroras of Scandinavia, falling stones from the sky, and mysterious fires in forests, fueled legends and superstitions. Every natural occurrence could carry moral or spiritual significance, shaping both local folklore and broader cultural beliefs. Human imagination and superstition. The Middle Ages were a time when imagination shaped reality. People believed in witches controlling the weather, saints intervening in daily life, and mystical creatures lurking in forests and rivers. Even ordinary items, like mirrors, herbs, and amulets, were imbued with magical significance. In 1405, a small town in France documented nightly, ghostly apparitions in the marketplace. Residents reported hearing voices, seeing floating lights, and witnessing objects move mysteriously. While modern science might attribute these events to psychological factors or natural phenomena, for the medieval townspeople, these were real encounters with the supernatural. Dreams, visions, and prophetic signs were also taken seriously. Chronicles describe individuals who claimed to predict battles, harvests, or epidemics. Some were consulted by kings, others feared as heretics. The line between reality and imagination was fluid, and this ambiguity defined much of medieval life. Conclusion: a world stranger than fiction. The Middle Ages were not merely a dark or primitive era, they were a time of wonder, terror, and extraordinary human creativity. From the bizarre festivals and strange battles to unusual medicine, royal intrigues, and mysterious natural events. This period offers stories that are both shocking and fascinating. Humanity in the medieval era faced disease, famine, superstition, and fear, yet it also celebrated life, created art, and navigated a world full of the extraordinary. The events recorded in chronicles, court records, and personal accounts remind us that history is often stranger than fiction, and that the Middle Ages, far from being a dark age, were filled with the unbelievable, the miraculous, and the utterly astonishing. For modern audiences, these stories are not just curiosities, they are a window into a human world driven by imagination, survival, and the endless search for meaning in the face of uncertainty. The Middle Ages, with all their strange events, remain a testament to humanity's enduring capacity for wonder, fear, and storytelling.